Hey, Ganesh from Covalent here. We are live with another live session of Open Office Hours as part of the 1 Million Wallets campaign. Our guest today is Brad from Unstoppable Domains. So a little bit about these domain name registrars, stuff that's on the blockchain. So right now, if you look at the user experience on Etherscan or one of these block explorers, they expect customers or users to put in their address hash. So it's going to be 0x, whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's not a good user experience. So what products like Unstoppable Domain does is they let you register human readable and memorable domain names. And I'll let Brad talk a little more about what makes Unstoppable Domain special and what features they have rolling out. But I think this is a crucial piece of infrastructure for mainstream adoption. So imagine before you had website addresses and you actually had to type IP addresses, or now with the IPv6, you have to type these huge hexadecimal strings. It's just not usable. It's just not it's not adaptable or accessible to a mainstream audience. So that's really what Brad and his team is doing for the entire blockchain crypto space. But I'm sure they have ambitions outside the space, so I will let Brad introduce himself, talk about the overall premise, why they started the problem, and then go from there. Brad, on to you.
Thanks a bunch, Ganesh. Thanks for having me. Excited to be doing this. So I guess real quick on me, I'm Brad. I'm one of the co-founders at Unstoppable Domains, focused on everything on the business side. And prior to this, was working on, co-founded a marketing tech company called Talkable. So nothing to do with the crypto world. It's an enterprise SaaS business I spent 6 years working on, and found myself going to sleep at night reading about crypto instead of enterprise SaaS. So this was my trigger to get into the game full time. Probably a familiar story to a lot of folks. So Unstoppable Domains, the idea is that we are onboarding users onto the decentralized web. And where this all started was that crypto networks have the ability to change the world, free the world, put users in control, take power away from existing companies and governments, etc. But all these networks are super hard to use. And one of the things that exists with the traditional web is naming. And so naming has the potential to be a solution to make crypto easier to use. And so we built our domain registries. We have 2 so far. And domain registries are launched as a suite of smart contracts on blockchains. And the domain names are ERC 721 tokens stored inside of a user's wallet. And so what this does is this makes it so for a domain name, nobody can move it around, nobody can make updates to the records, nobody can launch a new website or take down a website unless you control the private key the private key of the wallet where the domain name is sitting. So this is a new kind of security model for the internet, so to speak. And so what domain names are doing is they're doing a bunch of stuff that traditional domain names can't do. So one thing they're doing is they're being used as a payment mechanism. So I've got brad.crypto, got my Bitcoin address, my Ethereum address, my Litecoin address, maybe 10 other cryptocurrency addresses all attached to it. And now you can just go into a wallet, type in brad.crypto, and send me money. And this solves a bunch of problems. One is that it's tough to handle these 20 character or 40 character addresses, or I think ETH 2.0 is going to be 80 character addresses. So it's actually the problem's getting worse over time. So there's that problem where it's just it's difficult to manage, and it's scary. You want to make sure that you're sending to the right person. And then the other problem is that you may have dozens of addresses. As an individual, you may have multiple ETH addresses, or maybe multiple cryptocurrencies. You can tie all this stuff back to one domain name. So brad.crypto works for payments. It's like my decentralized Venmo account. Also works for websites. I've got a blog up right now at brad.crypto. You can check it out if you go to Opera browser for Android. You'll be able to go and type it in just like a normal .com and see my blog. So this is a website that only I can put up or take down. This is kind of a new concept. And if you think about the way that the internet works right now, domain names are actually a pretty big point of failure. You have to go and trust GoDaddy or some other registrar. They can get hacked. They can decide to take down your website, they do this. There's issues around copyright where aggressive copywriters are able to kind of abuse this problem. They're also taken down for all sorts of political reasons around the world. For example, the Spanish government was opposed to the Catalonian independence movement, and they were using .cat registry. They took down the entire registry because they didn't like what was happening on those websites. When the Libyan government changed in 2011 to become an Islamist government, they decided that every website in the world that had a .ly needed to conform to Islamic law. And so a whole bunch of what were considered to be morally inappropriate websites, including Canadian websites and American websites, etc., started going down. This is something that feels like it's in the background of the internet, but it's actually in the foreground. This is being used as a way for the US and China and various other companies to be able to police the internet. It's essentially that they have a backdoor through these domain names and the registrars. Blockchains completely eliminate this problem. So you've got payments, you've got websites. You can even use your domain for messaging. It would be like a future version of email. You can send me a message to brad.crypto. And what you get when you have one domain name that can do all of these different things is you get kind of a new relationship with people that you're dealing with online, where you know, for example, if you're messaging me and you're checking out my website, you know it's the same person. It can't be some Telegram thief. You know that if I'm paying you and I'm talking to you and I'm messaging you to this domain name, then I know that I'm dealing with the same person. So completely new security model for the decentralized web. This is the idea. This is what we're trying to build.
Thanks for that introduction. So I just want to unpack a couple of points that you mentioned. Now, you've presented maybe 2 or 3 ideas through the same domain name. So the first thing is the multi-chain thing, where it's able to resolve BTC and Litecoin and Ethereum addresses. And the second thing is the website hosting. Now, it seems like it's a general purpose resolver, but the Litecoin, those settlements are not done on Ethereum, they're done on Litecoin. So you need to make a call to the Ethereum blockchain, resolve that name, and then do the transaction or the settlement on Litecoin. How does that work with the website hosting? I'm very interested in that aspect.
Yeah, so you're right. It's a general purpose resolver, and if you were to go look up on the blockchain, it's really just key values. So you've got BTC equals this, ETH equals this, LTC equals this, IPFS hash equals this. And then that's what's happening on the website side is that browser. So for example, Opera browser, they go and they read the Ethereum. When you type in brad.crypto, they go and they read the blockchain, they find my IPFS hash, and then they display the website.
And so you have to build the integration above the resolver itself. So you make a call to Ethereum, resolve that IPFS hash, but you actually have to have an IPFS gateway or use Cloudflare or some other service provider or Infura to actually pull out the content. Is that right? Is that what Opera is doing?
That's what Opera's doing. I think that the dream state would be that there's a IPFS node in the browser, and so we built our own like demo version of a decentralized web browser a few months back to kind of display this, and so it has an IPFS node in there where you can optionally turn it on when you hit a certain website. I think that's the dream state, not having to rely on a gateway. But short of that, gateways aren't bad, particularly if you have multiple of them. So there's going to be a lot of different, degrees of decentralization and reliance on various parties as this tech rolls out. But fundamentally, if you have the records on the blockchain, you have much greater confidence that people are going to be able to access the content. Okay,
awesome. Now, how does your adoption story look like? So is this a custom deal that you've done with Opera? So there's a question from the audience. How do we get this into the crypto domain in the Google search bar? So obviously Chrome will have to integrate this somehow. So is it on a case-by-case basis? Like, how do we grow this to 1 million users, 10 million, 100 million, and 1 billion users? What is that story going to look like?
So applications do need to opt in to the decentralized web, unlike the traditional web where DNS just by default works inside of browsers. So they do need to opt in. The good news is that they're excited about it. You've probably, if you're following along, crypto Twitter in general, you've probably seen browsers digging into crypto pretty seriously. Opera and Brave being the two most prominent ones. But there's also a lot going on the Mozilla side too. Mozilla created a lab called Mozilla Builders Lab. They funded, I believe, 40 or so decentralized web projects. They're currently working on others. So the nice thing here is that the browser community gets it, and they are in the process of integrating crypto wallets. They're essentially becoming crypto companies, the browsers that are not owned by trillion-dollar companies. Now, the browsers that are owned by trillion-dollar companies, the calculus is different because they don't actually care about their browser very much. So that's not their core business. There's not really going to be a reason for them to invest in this space until it's bigger. So the answer is we're going to be able to form a fully functioning alternate internet from these alternate browsers that are embracing crypto, which will represent hundreds of millions of internet users, more than 10% of all internet users. But it won't be everybody until we have a larger base of users. And I think we've had more than 400,000 domains registered so far. So the user base is growing significantly. The application base is growing significantly. But I would imagine Chrome is going to be one of the final pieces of the puzzle.
Absolutely, it's almost like they're a late adopter at this stage.
And honestly, they should be. They're a giant company. Like, in order to move the needle for them, like, they need to see. I don't think there's any philosophical issues. I don't think they care one way or another. I think it's much more about, is this relevant to our users? And the best way to turn up the pressure there is to get users using the stuff, and get these alternative browsers that do have an interest, have a strong interest in getting into crypto and getting into crypto hard over the next year. And I think what you're going to see is browsers that are not owned by trillion-dollar companies are going to be essentially going full tilt crypto over the next couple of years.
Awesome. I'm really excited for that. I love the Brave browser. I know someone actually has my best interests at heart. So I'm really excited to see this pan out. Okay, so let's talk about all the possible things that you can build with unstoppable domains, interfaces, and so on and so forth. So you mentioned sending payments. You mentioned just simple resolvers. You mentioned sending messages, website hosting. What are some of the other things that unstoppable domains can do?
So this is going to be kind of like a big picture one, but I think there's an opportunity when you have naming to essentially do an almost a complete redesign of the way that wallets currently work, especially multi-currency wallets. So let's just set aside crypto for a moment and imagine, like, how does it work for a payment application in the traditional world? So, for example, Venmo. The way it works for Venmo is I go and I type in a username, and then I click send or receive, and I ask for money. That's it. That is essentially what I think a payment application should ultimately look like if we're talking about peer-to-peer or maybe even B2B payments. You need some information about the person that you're paying. So one of the features that we launched recently is the Twitter verification, where you use Chainlink in order to verify your real ID, your Twitter account, and associate it with your domain name by sending a message with your private key and tweeting out a code. And so the Chainlink oracles go and hit Twitter API and verify this, and then it's written on chain. And so the benefit of this is just the first step towards having verified information associated with a domain name. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to be able to, before you send money to somebody, say, I have some idea of who this is. Maybe I don't necessarily know their name or their real identity, but I know their pseudo identity, and that's what I'm trusting. And so this is a huge thing that's been missing in crypto payments, is you're just sending to a black box every time. You don't have any verified information about who you're sending to. So what I imagine here is going to happen is you don't necessarily even need to have all of these different wallets as a concept if you're sending. So like right now, the way it works is I say, okay, which currency do I want to choose? There's like 15 of them. And then I go in and I type in a domain and I send. But in the future, I think you might just have a send to domain, which currency. And you would wind up getting a much simpler interface. You would wind up getting something much closer to a Venmo, where you've got a sender and you've got a recipient. And I think that conceptually is where payments should ultimately be going. And I haven't seen this yet really in the crypto world. And again, my analogy is Venmo. If the closer we get to crypto payments being like Venmo, the more likely I think there will be more crypto payments. So that's one perspective. And if you use Venmo, you'll see that you can have social information validated. So you'll be able to see, like, you could click and see someone's Facebook profile or something like that to make sure that you're dealing with the right person, or their picture or whatever. So we have this identifying information as a key part of sending money in the regular world right now. That's totally missing from crypto.
Interesting. I would say, definitely the pseudo-anonymous, all of those features of crypto is, well, in my opinion, I'm not speaking for anyone, is actually a niche use case of crypto. And most people, like, I actually don't mind doing KYC. I don't mind, going through and exposing my social profile and all of that stuff. Like, I don't want to be pseudo-anonymous. I want to be fully known for this, but like, this is me. And if crypto helps me do that, crypto doesn't really help me do that. Like, there are people who are impersonating me on Telegram, and I know a couple of people who've been scammed, and that's really sad. But if they truly know that it's me, I think that would be awesome. That would clean up so much stuff in the space.
And the beauty of this is that crypto has a superpower in terms of being an identifier, because you've got this public-private key pair. So it has a far better security model than the identities that are being used in the traditional world. And, like Facebook, I think they have it was something like, they disclosed something like 500 million fake profiles that they identify and get rid of per quarter. So like more than almost the entire user, there's almost an entire Facebook user base's worth of fake profiles per year. That is a security disaster. And if you think about the magnitude of that problem, it makes complete sense why there were Russians hacking elections and any number of other things happening, because the system's not secure at all. And having a public-private key pair with a name and identity that you can build on and build reputation around is a huge solution. And I also think you're right. In the 1990s, if you go back and you look at the cartoons about the internet, all the jokes were about how no one's ever going to use this thing because you don't know who anyone is. It's all anonymous. And then now you fast forward 20 years later, and all the jokes are like, companies know every single detail about you. They know everything. You're completely exposed. The internet's not safe. So we went from 20 years ago, we don't know who anyone is, to 20 years later, oh, we were way overexposed. And that just tells you that we're in the early phase on the crypto side. It is not going to be this identityless, anonymous thing, because that's not how most transactions work. Most transactions require knowing who you're dealing with. Not necessarily a first and last name KYC, but I also agree with you. I think many transactions will be KYC'd, and people will be behaving in that way. So I think we're just in the early phase, the way we're doing it right now, and it is niche. And the way to fix that is to start associating real information or verified information about who you are transacting with. Seems kind of obvious when you say it out loud, but we're just in this early. Those of us who've been in crypto for several years have gotten used to this version, but I think it's very similar to how it was with the internet, where 1999 you had no idea who anyone was. 2019, you know who everyone is. I think there's going to be a better version of identity in the blockchain world, because you can prove who you are without having to share the goods. So, for example, I could say to you, "Hey, I don't want to give you my information. I don't want to give you my name even, but I will give you a proof that I am a verified American citizen, 18 years of age or older, whatever, something like that." So you have the ability to, you as the user are in control of your information. You're in control of what you disclose, and that's really the best of both worlds. Like you can disclose, you can not disclose, you can disclose proofs without actually giving up the real, goods. So those are the kind of opportunities with crypto in payments that I think haven't even. I mean, we're at zero basically on that stuff, and it's no wonder that people aren't using crypto for payments all the time, because Venmo's better right now.
Yeah, I mean, on a business B2B payments case, I think there's a stronger product market fit with payments. On the retail consumer side, I agree that it's still not slick enough. On the B2B side, with the instant settlement, like the fees, those are very, very attractive, especially at larger subs. It's just a no-brainer to use crypto.
It's good, but we still don't use it for a lot of our transactions because of the verification and the verification risks. Like, because ultimately, like, we as a business have a liability where if we send to the wrong person and we go and lose our investor money, we have liability. So the fact that it's some anonymous address exposes us to this, and a wire exposes us less. So even though it's more costly, even though it sucks, we still choose that because we don't have this verification problem solved. Now, that's not true for everybody in business, but I still think that business B2B has not been unlocked either until we do this, till we get more verifications around wallets, and be able to reasonably confirm who we're dealing with.
Awesome. Okay, so we're coming up on our time here. What's next for Unstoppable Domain? What are you guys working on for 2021? Anything you can disclose?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that we're working on is integrations. And so it's crypto wallets, crypto exchanges, dApps, browsers, those four categories. And the idea is for domains to be ubiquitous, and that's what makes them valuable. And right now, it's been moving pretty quickly. I think there's maybe 30-ish wallets so far. Several exchanges coming soon, browsers coming soon. So that's our main focus, and that's what's gonna make domains more useful.
I see. Okay, awesome. So one final question, like I just can't get this idea out of my head, and this is like a very selfish question. I'm gonna go create my own website, and I really want something I control, not something on WordPress or not something on Wix or Webflow. What is step by step my process of hosting my website on IPFS and having a .crypto domain?
So you can use our tools, which are kind of like our version of Wix, like simple like text editor or whatever, and build some very simple websites, a blog, some profile pages, things like that. And then what you're doing is you're taking your IPFS hash, you're generating an IPFS hash, and then you take your IPFS hash and you sign a message with your private key and write that to your to the blockchain associated with your domain name. And so there's kind of two ways you could do it. One is you could use those kind of web building tools that we have, and those are for non-technical users essentially. Or you could build and launch your own website on IPFS, take the hash, and then just go to unstoppabledomains.com, manage your domain, and just manually add that hash. So either way, you can either go and build something entirely on your own, or you could use one of those templates.
And if I have a .crypto, it's currently resolved in Opera, the Opera browser. What other browsers is currently supported?
Just Opera browser for now. More coming soon. And there's also Chrome extensions.
Interesting. Is there an extension, or is there a plan here to resolve to Twitter usernames?
So we already have to where it's not that you type in the Twitter username in order to send money. It's that you type in the domain name, and then wallets pull the record and find the Twitter account that was associated. So you basically can it's confirmatory before you send money. This works in my Ether wallet right now. You go and type in do I have my Twitter account associated? I don't have a Twitter account personally. So it's not brad.crypto. I'll have to to think of who's definitely already up. But basically what you do is you type in the domain name, and then before you have to send, you'll see it pop up. Hey, this Twitter account is associated. You can click it, check, make sure it's the person or the entity that you thought you were dealing with before you send.
Fascinating. So as a middleware provider here, Covalent could literally pull out the Twitter and associated social profiles when you resolve that name, just as a value add. So when you're sending it to .crypto, it shows your picture, shows your profile, shows you how many tweets you have, all that kind of stuff. Maybe just build a profile page. Okay, very interesting. Very, very interesting.
It's a very small step towards having verified identities and information about people before you send. But we thought it was a good place to start because Twitter is a native place for a lot of crypto users. It's also a pseudo-anonymous identity. It's not you're not exposing your real identity necessarily in this process. So it just seemed like a good place to start.
Okay, very cool. There is one more question. So the question is, at present, this .crypto domain is like a pay ID with a web page. What is next? So I'm not sure I follow that question.
So pay IDs maybe have the same intent, but the technology is quite different because pay IDs are stored on servers controlled by companies. Blockchain domains are stored on blockchains. So they are self-custody, they are censorship resistant, and tools that are stored on servers are not those things. So a pay ID is much more similar to like a username from the traditional web world, like your Venmo account or your PayPal account or something like that. And all of those still have this takedown risk, and for the most part, they don't have the same interoperability opportunity. One of the things that you get from blockchain is just that interoperability just works. If you're just like what Covalent is doing, if you're reading the blockchain and grabbing information, then that's enough. That's all you need. You don't need to hook in with some private company.
Okay, awesome. One final question. Is it possible for anyone to store arbitrary key value stores in the .crypto domain?
Yeah, and the biggest problem right now is standards for reading. So I would say that yes, you could, but how would that help you unless there was some standards for reading that information, and then what are apps doing? So I think if there's some data that you think would be relevant, please reach out, let us know. We can essentially add support for that in the interface, and also add the standard for how apps can read that in our libraries. Not every app uses our library, but at least it's a kind of a reference point. So there's a standard way to read that data. So yes, anything can be added. If you just did it on your own, though, it might not be super impactful, I guess would be the right way to say it.
Okay, makes sense. Well, thanks, Brad. I definitely learned a lot. I actually made a disclosure on Twitter this morning that one of the selfish reasons why I have these office hours is for me to learn what's going on with the tech. And there's just so much excitement, so much going on in the space. It's so hard to keep up with all the innovation and the cool teams. So thank you so much for your time. We'll end it here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Take care.